time for another episode of the Animated Critics. Coming to you live from the studio, it's your favorite movie mavericks, T and J!
Welcome to an all-new episode of This Week in Movies. I'm Jay, here with my co-host T. And this week we'll be taking a look at the mass marketing machine that Disney is hyping up for Tron 3D. We'll also be discussing the marketing push that Disney is doing for Alice in Wonderland and all the top nominations, the Oscars. And we'll be talking about our favorite horror films. But first, let's take a look at the weekend numbers.
And at number one, with a surprisingly strong opening weekend, was Jackass 3D, earning an estimated $50 million. I've got to guess that that's mostly coming from the 3D end of Jackass.
A lot of people saw this in 3D, but this is going to die off in a couple weeks. These films never hang around for very long. This is a very impressive gross nonetheless, and this might hit $100 million, which would call for a Jackass 4.
The $50 million opening might call for a Jackass 3D too, at least. And number two, surprisingly to me, $22.5 million for Red. The old-timey, right? You got old people, retired, but they're spies and they're coming back again.
I didn't feel any heat coming off of this at all. I thought it would open somewhere like Lucky Number 11 did, under $10 million. Apparently, people are in the mood for action films like we saw this summer with The Expendables, and they like their old school action heroes. This had a lot of familiar faces in it, and it couldn't hurt that it came out in a market where there wasn't much other action movies playing. Maintaining a strong position in the third spot was The Social Network, which dipped down to $11 million this weekend. It's a very good hold. It now rests at around $63 to $64 million total. Do you think that word of mouth has helped this film stay atop the box office?
Yeah, I mean, this is a movie that everyone that I know who has seen this, who normally don't like movies like this, have liked this movie. So I'm definitely, word of mouth has kept this up.
The thing I keep hearing from people is that this has turned into a strange sort of family film. A lot of fathers have taken their teenage kids to see this because it's fascinating to both sides. And honestly, the R rating is for language, and there's not much sexuality or nudity even in the film. It's mostly over the content of drinking underage and cursing. But I actually think this is getting business from families as well.
Which is surprising you say that, because the movie does have a lot of anti-women tones in it throughout it, really.
Which Aaron Sorkin himself has addressed now in the publicity too as well.
Aaron Sorkin has done nothing but boast about that movie and how he doesn't know anything about Facebook, but he wrote the script and he doesn't use internet stuff very much. So he can write good dialogue, but he doesn't know when to shut up.
Well, many people this weekend saw Jackass 3D and no doubt saw the trailer for Tron Legacy, which is going to be Disney's big holiday 3D film. And they're really pushing this strong. They're going to have a 10-week build-up to the film's premiere. It has the same premiere weekend as Avatar did last year. And they're offering 20 minutes of a free preview next week in IMAX theaters. Do you think that Disney took a look at the Avatar playbook and they are following it line for line?
They definitely have a hit on their hands with this. I think that following straight in Avatar's footsteps is actually a pretty good idea. Although I've never been one to really enjoy sneak peeks of 20 minutes of movies. Just like I don't watch the first 5-10 minutes of movies on the internet because it seems stupid. It seems so cheap. Like, why would I watch only that much of it? Tron 3D, though, I will say I'm definitely going to see this on IMAX 3D. It's going to be one of those big movies like that.
The idea of Tron, the sequel, has been floating around Comic-Con conventions years before the script even existed. They've promised the fans a lot. The build-up is going to be huge for this film, and luckily they have a trailer that plays great. You and I have said before that this is one of the better trailers to come out this year. I think they're going to have a massive hit on their hands. I just hope they don't overhype the film so that by the time it comes out, expectations are so high that it's considered a failure. Disney is also spending a considerable amount of money pushing for an Oscar nominations for its March hit in 3D, Alice in Wonderland. That film went on to gross over $1 billion in the global market, and Disney isn't just happy with that now. They want nominations in all the major categories, including Best Director and Best Picture. Now, do you think this is outlandish by Disney, or do you think that they have a legitimate shot in some of these categories?
Well, in some of the categories, sure, maybe special effects, costumes, things like that. Those are, I think, up for grabs by almost anyone. This definitely isn't going to win Best Picture. It does have a shot at possibly being nominated with the 10 slots now. I really don't think Tim Burton's going to be up for Best Director for this movie either. This snuck up on them, I think. They did not expect this to blow up into $1 billion. They're just putting their best foot first. They really don't have very many other movies. What else are they going to put up for Oscars this year?
The strong contender from the studio, and maybe even the frontrunner in the race right now, would be Toy Story 3. They could be in the race against themselves potentially in that arena.
To be fair, it's got its own category. I don't think that it has a chance at winning Best Picture.
Very true. And some people can argue that Tim Burton has been unjustly overlooked in his career by Oscars. It's hard, though, when you go up and down his list of films to really see a strong Oscar contender in the bunch. I could see arguments being made for Ed Wood or Big Fish. But outside of some technical categories, like you had stated, I really don't think this picture has a shot at Movie of the Year. Although you can also say that having 10 nominations in a category leaves it open so that you include films that were high grossers. We saw The Dark Knight get left out a couple years ago.
This all might be just to keep people happy. I mean, they were given a gift of $1 billion by Tim Burton and the Alice in Wonderland crew, so this could just be a way of them paying them back. Because an Oscar campaign off of $1 billion probably isn't going to cost you too much to go ahead and do.
I think you've hit the nail on the head on that. I think this is Disney's way of saying thank you to Burton and trying to keep a good relationship with him on future projects.
Past Oscar winner Peter Jackson actually has something good happening for The Hobbit, and that is a green light. Finally, he's been given the go-ahead. They are definitely making the movie. His miniature house is still burnt down. The unions are still mad. Yeah. And now that he's got a green light, he might just do what he says and take everything to Europe. So.
And now that we've reached mid-October, it's time to start talking about our favorite horror movies or scary films. I know you like horror films quite a bit, and you've seen many in your life. What are some of the best films that you've seen in the horror genre?
One of my favorite horror franchises are the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and I really enjoyed the last Wes Craven one, not the remake, but the New Nightmare. And if you watch New Nightmare, you can see a lot of Scream in that, and then how Scream came about, which is, I think, really an interesting thing to see.
I absolutely loved that film. It was one of my favorite in the series. By that time, I thought the franchise had been played out, and that one reinvigorated the whole thing. Unfortunately, it didn't find much of an audience but at the box office, but you're right, it had the writings of Scream on the wall in that picture, and Wes Craven was trying something totally different and very eerie at the same time with that film. Great pick. One of my favorite horror films in the last couple years was Paranormal Activity. I know a lot of people had an adverse reaction to it. Some people really liked it. Some people thought it was really gimmicky. I saw it in the theater with people that were really going with it, and to see it with an audience that was screaming in the right places, there was a certain sense of dread in that film that was almost palpable, and it really stuck with me afterwards.
A funny story about Paranormal Activity. The other night, my mom, I tried to get her to watch Paranormal Activity because it's streaming on Netflix, and she was like, I'm too scared, I don't want to watch it. And a few days later, I get a text message. She says, which movie did you want me to watch? And I said, Paranormal Activity. She said, okay, I'm watching it now, and it's really not that scary, and it's not very good either. And I checked in my instant queue, recently watched, Paranormal Entity was the movie. She watched the Asylum one. My next pick would have to be Vacancy. I really, really enjoyed this movie. It didn't catch on, as most horror movies don't really catch on. It was frightening to me. It had a lot of suspense to it, which is what makes a horror movie good, in my opinion.
I enjoyed Vacancy, but I enjoyed this film a lot more, and that was The Strangers. That came out a couple years ago, and I really didn't have any interest in seeing it. Caught it one night late on cable, and it absolutely did the job. It had me looking around the house, making sure all windows and doors were locked, and it really kind of spooked me. I enjoy a film that gets under my skin. Usually I can take myself out of the moment and think about how they're doing what they're doing and playing with the audience, but that movie really just, it creeped me out. No other way to say it.
I really think you have to mention, if you were a child of the 80s, Troll and Troll 2. It works best if you are young. They're laughable today, but still fun to watch. I enjoy them a lot. When I was a kid, I liked Cat's Eye a lot. That little goblin thing that tried to get Drew Barrymore. He just kept me up at night.
Well, probably the most disturbing film that I've seen in the last couple of years is a little film out of Australia that came out in 2005 named Wolf Creek. And that is a harrowing, very tough outback movie. The Australians seem to do their genre films right, whether it be action pictures, road pictures, or horror pictures.
I agree. I mean, it's definitely in the vein of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, of which the remake I actually really liked, and also the original. In the same vein, just very, very gory, very bloody, very cut off from the world.
And we can't leave out the biggest horror franchise of the last decade, and that's the Saw films. Lionsgate stumbled upon a huge franchise for their company. It really has kept the blood going through Lionsgate films. Those films now, we're going on 7 here in 7 years. They really have attracted a following. You can't really say it's a cult following because they do very well at the box office, but there are people that are very passionate about the story. It has to be the longest running narrative in a horror franchise of all time. Do you like the Saw films? Are you a fan of any one Saw film over the other, or have you seen any of the films?
They all seem to be very similar and almost exactly the same to me. I mean, in tone and in really how the movie plays out. So I never really enjoyed them. And I also think that it has failings of there's no imagination in those movies, really. There's no fun, in a Saw movie for me.
I think they are missing a sense of humor. That's why I enjoyed the Hostel pictures, because those at least knew what they were and had a little bit of fun with it, particularly Hostel Part 2. But there's not much joy in there, the Saw films, but they have created a subgenre onto their own, which is the torture porn genre.
They didn't so much invent that, but they really did bring that to the masses in a way that seemed suitable, in a way that seemed that people could actually swallow that type of stuff, which is a feat amongst itself, because that's a lot of torture porn is something that has just never really gotten off the ground. Not a lot of people have gone to go see any of those types of films.
For better or worse, we've seen a lot of films come out and try to copy Saw and fail miserably, so they must be doing something right.
Leave a comment below or email us at animatedcritics@moviemavericks.com. Let us know what you'd like us to discuss in future episodes. If you have any questions about movies, any reviews you want us to do, or any trailers you'd like us to talk about.
That does it for our show this week. Thank you for joining us, and please make sure to check out moviemavericks.com for all the latest movie news, movie trailers, and latest reviews. Thank you for joining us, and be sure to check back next week for a new episode.